Mom, don't embarrass me. Nathan snapped, voice sharp as broken glass, just before he flung the red wine. It arced through the air and exploded across Eleanor's face, drenching her silk dress and the pale lavender handkerchief clutched in her hand. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else looked away. Nathan didn't flinch. He simply turned back to his table, as if the chaos hadn't touched him. Eleanor stood frozen, warm wine dripping down like a slow confession of hurt. For a moment, she remembered the little boy who used to tug at her sleeve when he tried on a new tie, asking if he looked like his father. David would always laugh, kneel beside him, and whisper about kindness and character, lessons he hoped Nathan would carry into life. But that memory felt like glass, bright, distant, untouchable. The ballroom shimmered with golden light, crystal chandeliers scattering jazz notes like sparks. Eleanor had arrived that morning with a small bouquet of lavender wrapped in brown paper. The estate looked like something from a magazine spread, white columns, gleaming fountains, and drapes that glowed in the morning sun. Sophie greeted her with a practiced smile, soft and polite but as hollow as the champagne flutes lining the tables. "You're so welcome, Mrs. Whitmore," Sophie had said, hugging Eleanor with measured distance. Her eyes never quite met Eleanor's, glimmering instead with subtle judgment. A planner handed her a seating card, overflow. The family section was across the room. Eleanor felt a pang of exclusion, sharp and bitter, and folded her lavender bouquet beside her plate, its soft hue clashing with the silver and gold table settings. Earlier, when a young waitress had stumbled near the champagne, Nathan had barked at her so loudly that the music faltered. Eleanor had approached him quietly, her hand brushing his arm, trying to remind him of who he had once been. "Nathan," she said softly. "You should apologize. You made her cry." He turned to her with a tight smile, the same expression he wore now. "Mom, this isn't one of your moral lessons. Don't embarrass me." And then came the wine. Warm, sticky, humiliating. Eleanor blinked through the red haze, realizing her silence had begun that night, and Nathan's carefully constructed world had started to crack. The guests whispered behind their hands, uncertain whether to intervene or ignore the eruption of private fury displayed so publicly. As she wiped at her face, Eleanor remembered the lavender blooms she had carried from David's garden that morning. They were meant to bring calm, peace, and grounding in a room brimming with wealth and whispered judgment. She felt their scent faintly now, mingling with the rich aroma of spilled wine and polished oak. Across the room, Sophie leaned toward her maid of honor, eyes flicking toward Eleanor with a thinly veiled smirk. Eleanor met her glance without flinching, silently marking the invisible lines Sophie had drawn between their worlds. For the first time, Eleanor understood the night wasn't just about humiliation. It was about reckoning, about patience, and about the fragile bond between mother and son, a bond Nathan had just tested in a way that would echo for years to come. A quiet exile wrapped in silk and polished silver. Dinner had started. Glasses chimed. Nathan never glanced my way. When the photographer called for a family portrait, Sophie leaned in, her lips near his ear, and murmured, "Not now. Later." So I remained still, gripping my glass of water, listening to the music ripple through the room. It was his day. I told myself I'd stay silent. Quiet, I reminded myself, didn't mean I was blind. I noticed the possessiveness in Sophie's hand as it rested on Nathan's arm. I saw the shift in his laughter, sharp, deliberate, practiced. Somewhere beneath the sparkling chandeliers, the boy who had once raced barefoot through our backyard, chasing butterflies in the morning sun, disappeared behind the polished mask of manhood. I adjusted the lavender handkerchief in my lap and exhaled slowly. There would be no scene. No tears. Not tonight. They could have their flawless day. Even the cruelest stories need a beginning. There was a time when my world was small but vibrant. Mornings began with the scent of coffee and chalk dust. Evenings ended with David's violin drifting softly from his study, the house humming with life. Money was modest, but love and purpose were plentiful. I taught literature to teens who scoffed at poetry until they realized the power of words to carry them through despair. Nathan, when he was little, would curl against me as I graded essays, the warmth of his hair smelling of soap and sunlight. I would whisper favorite lines from the books I adored, urging him to hold kindness close, even when the world forgot it. His sleepy smile made it feel like he understood. David had often told me, "Eleanor, you give too much." He traced his pencil along his architectural blueprints, always pushing beyond the edges. Save something for yourself. Love isn't counted in what you give, it's measured in what you keep safe for yourself. We believed in pouring our hearts into the world, never keeping score. After David's death, the house quieted, yet I poured myself into raising Nathan. Every tuition payment, every college fee, every loan co-signed, every opportunity funded, I did it all with the conviction that family rises together. I remember the night Nathan closed his first big deal, calling me with pride shining in his voice. "Mom, we did it," he said, and I believed him. I thought that love and generosity were inseparable, that giving endlessly was proof of devotion. I was wrong. At the wedding, my reflection stared back at me from a silver ice bucket. The lavender handkerchief in my hand quivered. I dabbed at the corner of my mouth where red wine had seeped, a scent clinging like memory. Between motherhood and sacrifice, I had almost forgotten myself. As laughter swelled around me, as music danced bright and indifferent above us, clarity replaced anger. Love without respect is not love. The music lifted again, hollow, a celebration unaffected by chaos. I stood under the chandeliers, wine dripping from my hair, a growing stain spreading over silk. Its scent, heavy and sweet, wrapped around me like pity. Nathan's voice cut through the hum. "You ruin everything," he shouted, sharp as a dropped crystal. Sophie's fingers brushed his arm. "He's just nervous," she said quickly, smiling at the onlookers, rehearsed in tone and gesture, a bride safeguarding the image of her husband. I met her gaze, then his. Nathan, flushed and shaking, stood in the center of applause that had shifted to uncertain silence. The same people who had toasted our family now froze, unsure whether to console or step back. I lifted the lavender handkerchief to my cheek, smearing the red like bruised roses. Someone whispered, "Is she all right?" I wasn't sure, but I knew that speaking now would shatter something inside me I could not yet repair. Silence fell between us like a curtain. Nathan avoided my eyes, and Sophie guided him toward their table, her white dress brushing my stained gown. Forced laughter echoed behind me, hollow and brittle, draining the room of warmth. I stepped forward, then another, heels clicking against marble, each sound resonating like a slow countdown, the end of a chapter that had once been sacred, now quietly dissolving. No one moved. No one intervened. I reached the glass doors, pushed them open, and stepped into the night. The air was cool, scented with vineyards and faint iron. Stars glittered, indifferent and distant. My hands shook, not from fear, but release. I folded the lavender handkerchief carefully, slipped it into my purse, and lifted my chin. Inside, the party continued, laughter brittle and rehearsed. Through the panes, I could see Nathan lift his glass again, toasting as if I had never existed. He celebrated love while erasing the respect I had earned. Wine might wash from fabric, but dignity stains far deeper. The drive home was silent, the highway stretching before me like a ribbon of glass beneath a pale moon. The house greeted me with a quiet so complete it felt sacred, the kind only years of laughter and life together can build. I slipped off my shoes, placed the lavender handkerchief on the table, and stared at the faint red stain, stubborn and immovable. Somewhere outside, a dog barked once, then fell silent. I moved toward David's old study, its familiar scent of cedar and ink wrapping around me. Dust lay thick on his drafting table, the place where he had sketched buildings meant to endure storms and time alike. His blueprints, corners curling, still hung on the walls, reminders of his meticulous care. Under the desk was a wooden box, marked with his initials. He had shown it to me once, years ago, saying, "Open this only when the world corners you." Tonight felt like that moment. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed at the edges, my name written in David's careful, deliberate hand. I sank into the chair, trembling as I unfolded it. "My dearest Eleanor, if life ever humiliates you, remember this, the villa and all accounts are in your name alone. Yours. Not ours. Not theirs. Protect peace, not pride. Trust that you are stronger than circumstance." Tears blurred the ink. David had always built foundations both of stone and of trust, planning for a world I couldn't yet see. I pressed the letter to my chest and whispered, "I'll build my walls, my way." When I looked at the lavender handkerchief, the wine stain no longer seemed like shame. It was a mark of survival, proof of a life fortified by foresight. Morning arrived gray and still, the lavender fields beyond the window swaying gently, whispering secrets I was finally ready to hear. I brewed coffee, placed David's letter beside the cup, and gathered every document bearing my name. Bank statements, property titles, insurance policies, the villa deed, each felt heavier than memory, a testament to decades of trust. For years, I had signed blindly. Now, I read every word with care, decoding the promises David had quietly ensured. Everything was mine, legally, securely, irrevocably. I dialed Margaret Lopez, her voice crisp over the line. "Eleanor," she said, "I heard about the wedding. Are you all right?" "I will be," I answered, "but I need you to confirm something for me." Papers rustled. Keys clicked. Then she spoke again, tone steady. "You're the sole owner. The villa, the accounts, everything is under your name." I traced the faded ink of David's signature. "Then the time for patience begins," I said softly. Margaret hesitated. "What are you planning?" "Nothing loud. Nothing cruel. Only fair," I replied. The call ended. Sunlight spilled over the table. I opened my journal for the first time in years and wrote 2 words, "Protect peace." While they celebrated, I read the fine print. While they reveled in victory, I calculated. Anger had faded, only precision remained. Revenge, if it came, would whisper, never roar. I folded David's letter, placed it back in its envelope, and laid the lavender handkerchief beside it, calm, patient, ready for the next chapter. Justice doesn't shout. It waits. 2 days later, I met Jack Morrison at a quiet cafe tucked between the vineyards, the scent of earth and coffee grounding me in a world that I now controlled, silently, deliberately, and entirely my own. The morning smelled of coffee and damp earth. Jack stood as I entered, the same quiet courtesy he had always shown David. His hair had thinned at the temples, but his eyes were steady, kind. "David told me once," he said, pulling out a chair, "if the boy ever lost his way, help Eleanor find hers." I managed a faint smile. "Then today is that day, Jack." From his leather briefcase, he withdrew a red ribbon folder. Inside were the villa's appraisal documents, draft contracts, and a list of discreet, trustworthy buyers, people who offered cash without questions. We went through each sheet carefully, every signature line, every clause, each phrase precise and unyielding. David would have approved. When Harper arrived with our coffee, Jack leaned closer. "Are you sure about this?" "I am," I said, tracing the rim of the cup. "This house was built with love. Now it will buy me peace." Later, we went to Jack's office. Margaret appeared on a video call, glasses catching the sunlight as she read each page aloud, checking for gaps, loopholes, anything that could later become a problem. "The funds will go into a private trust," she confirmed. "Under your name alone. I'll manage the sale quietly," Jack added, voice low. "No public listing. Discretion is essential." I stood near the window, watching the sunlight fracture into shards on the polished floor. Calmness settled over me like a long-awaited guest. Not weakness, not grief, just quiet, complete calm. When the documents were ready, Jack handed me a pen. "This signature will close one chapter and begin another." I inhaled deeply and signed. The pen moved smoothly across the page, carrying the authority of years spent building, sacrificing, and trusting. The paper received the ink like soil drinking rain. When I looked up, both of them were smiling. Revenge required no shouting, no fire, only precision, patience, and signatures. Outside, the vineyard swayed, as though whispering its approval. By week's end, Nathan's name appeared in polished headlines. "The Whitmore Foundation donates $500,000 to children's literacy programs," read the articles. A photo showed Nathan and Sophie posing in front of the banner, smiles wide and hollow, hands clasped, looking every bit the model philanthropists. I sat at my kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the floor, warming my bare feet. Stirring my tea, I watched the dark color fade to pale. Pride often masquerades as virtue. Nathan had used the accounts I had opened in both our names. Margaret confirmed it over the phone. "He transferred the funds last month," she said. "Probably thought you wouldn't notice." I glanced at the lavender handkerchief folded beside the papers. "I noticed," I whispered, "and I'll let him believe it was his idea." That evening, I watched the televised gala. Sophie's diamond earring sparkled at every flash. Nathan spoke into the microphone, polished, rehearsed. "We're committed to building a better future," he said. I almost laughed. His speech, each practiced word, was a monument to his own undoing. I turned off the television and let the quiet wrap around me. Anger had long since drained, only steady satisfaction remained. I opened my journal and marked the 2 words I had written days before: protect peace. Pride is costly. It demands reason, humility, sometimes even the soul itself. I lifted my teacup, watching the sunlight tremble on its surface. Time was moving in my favor. He had bought pride with my patience, and I allowed him to keep the receipt. Days passed like careful chess moves. Early one morning, Jack called. "All documents are ready." 3 buyers lined up, 2 private investors, 1 European collector. Above market offers. Then let's proceed, I said, voice calm. My coffee steamed beside David's old letter, edges softened from rereading. By noon, I was back in Jack's office, signing the contracts beneath a single pool of sunlight, deliberate, steady, unflinching. Each page turned softly, the rustle of paper filling the quiet room. Margaret spoke through the speakerphone, calm and meticulous. Eleanor, the transfer route is ready. Once the sale completes, funds move through 2 holding accounts, then into your private trust. Fully secure. Thank you, I said. Make sure Nathan can't trace a single cent. That's already handled, she assured me. Outside, the vineyards shimmered gold in the afternoon sun. A single leaf drifted lazily against the windowpane, caught for a heartbeat before falling. It was a reminder of release, clean, irrevocable. By evening, I held the final document in my hands. My signature was unwavering. This home, I whispered, once cradled love. Now it safeguards justice. Jack slid the papers into the folder, sealing it with a red stamp. It's done, he said. Confirmation from the bank will come within 24 hours. I allowed myself a faint smile. That was more than enough time. Across town, Nathan was hosting a glittering corporate gala, the same hour his champagne and cameras paraded pride. Meanwhile, I closed my laptop. Passport tucked beside the lavender handkerchief. The screen displayed 3 simple words, transfer completed. $4.2 million. Safe. Untouchable. He had stained me with wine. I had stained his future. At the gala, Nathan's card was declined at the bar. Confusion flickered across his face. A forced laugh. Calls to the bank yielded only silence. I turned off the light. Outside, the city was hushed. Justice had been written in ink, not fury. The following morning, I left San Francisco beneath a soft silver sky. I packed methodically, clothes folded with care, the lavender handkerchief resting on top like a seal of calm. Margaret called as I zipped the last bag. Funds confirmed. Your trust is active. Documentation cleared. You are free to travel. Thank you, Margaret, I said. For everything, she replied. You deserve peace, Eleanor. At the airport, the terminal was busy, yet my mind remained serene. Passport, ticket, and the small envelope containing David's letter were secure. The security agent smiled. Traveling alone. Always have, I said, meaning it. I moved through the crowds, the scents of coffee and jet fuel mingling in the air. A child cried nearby. A man laughed too loudly behind me. Step by steady step, I pressed forward. At the gate, I settled by the window, watching planes ascend. My phone vibrated, 12 missed calls. Nathan's name flashed. Then 13, then 14. I turned it face down. He would soon learn silence, not cruelty, not absence, but consequence. Through the glass, the first drops of rain traced streaks across the window, faint echoes of the wine from that fateful night. I thought of Harper, the waitress Nathan had humiliated. I hoped she had found gentler workplaces, kinder paths. The boarding call echoed. I rose, adjusted my coat, and lifted my suitcase. My reflection stared back from the glass, composed, unbroken, free. Some departures are not escapes, they are sentences delivered quietly, completely. As the plane climbed above the city, the skyline blurred into mist. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Protect peace, not pride." By the time I crossed the Atlantic, Nathan's carefully curated world had already begun to unravel. He awoke to a storm of buzzing phones and unread messages. The first, from his accountant, urgent, clipped, all accounts frozen. The second, from the bank, polite, unyielding, ownership had been restructured months ago. "What do you mean, restructured?" he shouted, pacing the marble floor of his penthouse. Sophie appeared in the doorway, robe pristine, hair flawless. "Nathan, what is it?" "Our money," he gasped, voice cracking. "All of it. The villa, the accounts, everything." She moved it. Sophie blinked, confused, then frowned. Your mother." He didn't answer. Already, he was dialing every contact he could think of, banks, lawyers, anyone who might reverse what he hadn't protected. Each call ended the same way, silence. A silence so sharp it pressed against Nathan like judgment. When he slammed the phone down, Sophie watched him with the same cold precision she had once used to manipulate me. "Nathan," she said slowly, her voice flat, deliberate. "Did you sign anything? Did you give her access?" He tried to recall the forms, the shared accounts, the power of attorney he had dismissed as trivial. Every memory betrayed him. His hands shook. She wouldn't. But she already had. Sophie gathered her purse, tone clipped. "Call me when you figure it out." The door clicked shut. Finality. Nathan sank into the leather chair, surrounded by unopened bills, framed photographs of a life he had assumed was his. The wine glass on the table tipped, spilling crimson across the white linen, spreading fast, staining as deeply as humiliation itself. Outside, phones kept ringing. Inside, only silence. Within days, the story hit the headlines. Newspapers that had once celebrated the Whitmore Foundation now carried a new title, "Charity Under Investigation." The article detailed misused funds, discrepancies between donations and deposits. Nathan's photograph, once polished and radiant, now looked strained beneath bold black letters. He sat alone, empty bottles littering his desk, calls unanswered. Notifications blinked relentlessly. Partners withdrew. Clients vanished. Pride, once his favorite suit, no longer fit. Sophie stormed in, eyes ablaze. "Do you understand what you've done? Our names are in these papers." "I'll fix it," he muttered, but the words sounded hollow. "I just need time," he added. "Time?" She laughed bitterly. "You don't have a business anymore. You don't even have a home. Everything you built relied on your mother, and you burned the bridge." She let her wedding ring click against the glass table. "We're done." He reached for her, but she stepped away. "You humiliated the only person who ever loved you. What did you expect would follow?" The door slammed, the echo lingering. He turned toward the window, watching his reflection tremble in the city lights. His face was unfamiliar, smaller, older, frightened. Silence pressed against him like a physical weight. The television droned in the corner. Authorities confirmed that all assets had been legally transferred months ago. Nathan had no claim. He stared at the screen until his eyes blurred. A single glass of red wine sat untouched beside him, its aroma sharp and lingering. The wine he had once thrown had aged into karmic reckoning. He reached for it. His hand shook. The glass slipped, shattering on the floor. The crimson spread across the tiles like a ghost returning. A week later, Margaret entered Nathan's nearly empty office. Blinds half drawn, the air thick with the scent of stale wine and regret. He looked up, eyes red, tie loose, every trace of confidence gone. She set an envelope on his desk. "Your mother asked me to give you this," she said quietly. He froze. "She spoke to you?" Margaret shook her head. "Not recently. She left this before leaving the country." When she was gone, the room felt colder. He stared at the envelope, Nathan Hale Jr. written in neat, deliberate handwriting. Each letter seemed etched with the care Eleanor had always shown, one for every tear she refused to shed. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no signature, just a few lines in blue ink. "You stained me with wine. I stained your future with truth." Nothing else. No apology. No explanation. Just those words, measured, deliberate, final. He read them over and over until the ink blurred. Silence pressed in, thick and unbearable. He pressed the letter to his forehead, whispering Eleanor's name, as if that could undo what had been done. For the first time, he understood the weight of her stillness. Her silence had never been weakness, it had been judgment, a sentence delivered quietly, completely, and without emotion. Nathan stood by the window, the city below flickering like a confession. In the reflection of the glass, his face merged with the memory of Eleanor, her calm expression, the lavender handkerchief, the quiet steadiness in her eyes. Justice moves quietly where pride once shouted. A folded sheet of paper slipped from his fingers, fluttering to the floor like a leaf torn from a branch. He did not reach for it. He simply stared as it rested there, light as forgiveness, heavy as truth. Night draped over the city, bruised and deep. Nathan sat alone in the apartment that once rang with laughter, the chandeliers above dark, catching only faint glimmers from passing headlights. Dust had settled on the edges of photographs, each frame holding a smile that no longer belonged to him. Sophie's perfume lingered faintly on the couch, a reminder of her final, sharp departure. Where her shoes had lined the hallway, only emptiness remained. He tried calling her again. Voicemail. Short, final, merciless. He poured a glass of wine, then froze mid-pour. The aroma hit him like memory, sweet, acidic, unforgiving. His hand shook. Slowly, he set the glass down. Outside, the city pulsed with life, cars humming, laughter echoing in streets he would never enter. He remembered Eleanor in the golden ballroom, calm as the wine ran down her cheek. He had thought her fragile. He had mistaken patience for surrender. Nathan lifted a photo from the shelf, himself as a boy on his mother's lap, her arms around him, her quiet pride etched into her smile. His thumb traced her face. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, though no one listened. The wine glass tipped. Crimson spread across the floor, curling around his shoes, seeping into the rug like the echo of that night. He finally tasted the bitterness he once handed out freely. The room dimmed. The last light flickered out. He was small, still, utterly alone. Morning sunlight spilled over the Tuscan coastline, soft and golden. Waves rolled against the sand like old friends greeting one another. I stood on the balcony of a small white house overlooking the sea, a warm cup of coffee in hand. The air smelled of salt and rosemary. Elena Vargas, my neighbor, waved from her garden. "Good morning, Senora Eleanor," she called, cheerful and kind. "Good morning, Elena," I replied, smiling. "Peaceful today." When she returned indoors, I turned toward the horizon. Sunlight shimmered on the water, endless, forgiving. I thought of David, of his blueprints for homes filled with light. I thought of Nathan, the boy who had once believed kindness could build anything. No anger remained. Only the stillness that follows a storm finally spent. On the table beside me lay the lavender handkerchief, freshly washed, its faint stain now a ghost of memory rather than pain. Next to it, David's letter, soft and worn from years of rereading. I took a slow sip of coffee, warmth spreading through my chest. Seagulls cried overhead, fleeting and sharp. For the first time in years, silence was not heavy, it was complete. The sea does not demand apologies. It simply forgives. I closed my eyes, letting the wind lift my hair, carrying away the last remnants of that night in Napa. When I opened them, the horizon stretched wider, brighter, infinite. The past had ended. Peace remained. Late afternoon light spilled across the kitchen table, turning everything gold. Outside, the sea mirrored the sky. I arranged lavender in a small glass vase when the mail arrived. An envelope from Margaret lay in the pile. Her handwriting, precise, steady, was unmistakable. Inside was a brief note and another envelope. He wrote this. "Never found you. I thought you should have it." My fingers trembled as I opened the second envelope. The paper was creased, the ink slightly faded. Nathan's handwriting, careful and unfamiliar. "Mom, I was wrong about you. About everything. I thought silence meant weakness, but it was strength. I wish I could see you again. I hope you have found peace." I read it twice, then set it beside my coffee. Outside, waves lapped at the shore, patient and unhurried. I reached for the lavender handkerchief, smoothing its corners, then lifted a glass of red wine, the same variety Nathan had once thrown. Sunlight caught the liquid, deep and radiant. He had thrown wine to shame me. I lifted my glass to remember, some stains become strength. I swirled it slowly, took a small sip, letting it rest on my tongue. It no longer tasted bitter. Wind moved through the open window, carrying the scents of salt and lavender. I closed my eyes and smiled. Somewhere far away, the world remained loud and restless. But here, in this quiet sanctuary, justice had already spoken. I folded the handkerchief carefully, placing it beside the letter. Outside, the sea glimmered as gold melted into blue. Peace does not announce itself. It simply arrives, and it stays.